Unfortunately, when it comes to Shiba Inu, there is a lot of misleading information out there. And where this becomes a problem is Shiba Inu is a retail driven asset, is a sentiment driven asset. So when times are not that great, when you're just getting bombarded time and time again by negative news, that tends to make people start acting irrational. They start investing more with emotion rather than with their mind. And this is where you run into problems. And I stumbled across a couple things in terms of Shiba Inu that I do want to address in this video because they are not true. All right. Well, they're not correct per se. And I stumbled across actually something very interesting that should give you a lot of confidence in Shiba Inu moving forward. So if you guys are new or haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, hit that bell. It's free to do. It'll keep you updated anytime there's new content live here on the channel. So first of all, let's talk about a few things I stumbled on. First, the first one being Shiba Inu new adoption rate collapses to 2-year low. What's happening? And what this was referencing was basically an outlier day. What we actually saw was back on Monday, February 17th, we saw the Shiba Inu new adoption rate drop to 12.72%, which yes, that is in fact a 2-year low. Now, there's a little bit of context that needs to be added to this. So Shiba Inu adoption rate is typically between 30 to 40%. And what adoption rate is, for those that aren't familiar, is of all these on-chain transactions that occur for Shiba Inu, this would mean that new wallets constitute that percentage of them. So for example, if there's 1,000 transactions that happen in a single day for Shiba Inu and 300% of them are, I'm sorry, 300 of them are by first-time Shiba Inu wallets, that means adoption rate is going to be 30%. All right. So typically, again, we're in this 30 to 40% range. And we had a day where we saw it drop to 12.72%. And the reason why is, if you guys remember, we had that big outflow day in terms of holders. We dropped like 9,000 holders in one day. It was a big kind of exodus day across the market. And we saw transactions spike. We saw a majority of these transactions, people just calling it quits, saying, I'm done, I'm not doing it anymore. Right. And then we've basically stabilized since then. In fact, Shiba Inu adoption rate is back up to 35 to 40%. Go figure. So no, we're not seeing adoption rate collapse. In fact, we're seeing a lot of similarities to what we saw before that date. Secondly, Shiba Inu trillionaires disappearing, worrying data. And no, we're not seeing Shiba Inu trillionaires disappear. And in fact, I did a little bit of diving into this data. What I found was actually quite interesting. So for the last 3 months, all right, just looking back at the Shiba Inu chart, this 3-month range basically started all the way back on, November 24th or so. All right. And during that time, Shiba Inu has dropped about 40%, which there's no way to sugarcoat it. It sucks. It sucks that price is down that much. Unfortunately, we're kind of dealing with this across the crypto market. And what we saw during that time was, yeah, in fact, there were holders leaving, but we need to talk about who those holders were and does it really matter? So since that time, yes, we did see, actually, I think 2 of the big trillionaire addresses for Shiba Inu actually leave. So the first one actually dropped, when was that? November 26th. So we went from 6 addresses with 10 trillion to 100 trillion Shiba Inu. It dropped to 5. Now, what's interesting is at that same time, we actually saw a spike in the 1 trillion to 10 trillion Shiba Inu addresses. So they may have actually sold some of their position, but not all of their position. Then the following drop was actually all the way on, where was that? That was on December 16th. All right. And we saw this drop from 5 addresses down to 4 addresses. And again, what we saw was a subsequent move from the 10 trillion to 100 trillion addresses drop, then to the 1 trillion to 10 trillion addresses climb. So it's again possible they just shifted down basically a bracket. But I think what is very important here is when we look at these last 3 months, what has happened from an overall standpoint. So we had basically, what would that be? 51 addresses with basically 1 trillion Shiba Inu or more 3 months ago. Well, where do we stand now? We now currently sit at 53 addresses with 1 trillion Shiba Inu or more. So no, trillionaires for Shiba Inu are actually on the rise. Shiba Inu trillionaires, right? Now, what's happened during that same time is we have also seen a pretty substantial rise in small holders of Shiba Inu. So those between 0 to 1 million SHIB and those between 1 million to 10 million Shiba Inu. So we've actually seen the 0 to 1 million climb from basically 447,000 addresses to 495,000 addresses. We've also seen the 1 to 10 million Shiba Inu holders climb from 549,000 addresses to 567,000 addresses. So why is this in fact so important? What we're witnessing is actually both far ends of Shiba Inu are in fact on the rise. We're seeing the large whales, the largest of the large, actually increase in size and position. And what we're seeing is on the low end, the very speculative, maybe new people in the space, people throwing just a couple bucks in here and there, whatever, they are actually diving into Shiba Inu as well. Both of those holder classes are important. Now, when we look at the middle, that's where the water gets a little bit muddy. And what we've actually seen is basically addresses between 10 million to 100 billion Shiba Inu actually on the drop. Now that sucks, right? That's not, a great thing. It's never great to see those addresses drop. And what's kind of interesting here is between 100 billion to 1 trillion has basically been sideways. We saw it spike all the way up to 625 addresses, back down to 610, which I'll get to that in just a moment. But what's interesting here is I look back at the time frame from the 3 months prior to this, right as Shiba Inu was bottoming and started to make this move to the upside. And what I found was kind of interesting here. Those same holder classes were on the rise, both far ends. And during that time, we were still watching the middle wallets begin to drop. So what we're seeing is actually an overall makeup shift in the Shiba Inu holders. We are seeing the long-term, very speculative people dive into Shiba Inu at the bottom, and we're seeing the whales build their positions for the next leg of Shiba Inu as well. The last thing to come that really moves price is the speculative people that are in the middle. All right. We obviously saw that spike there. We've seen that spike in terms of other holder classes here too. And what's interesting is this is what moves Shiba Inu to new highs. This is what moves assets to new highs. Now, when does that take place? It takes place when prices are running, when things are exciting. Okay. And what I think is very important here is while we have seen an exodus from those middle holder classes, Shiba Inu has in fact been setting higher lows. We are building a much higher foundation than what we have in the past, right? It's the steps up like we talked about, step up, step up, step up, step up. And of course we had the steps along the way here before we had our drop, but you guys get the point. This is actually Shiba Inu building strength on the back of its holders. And that's a very important sign. Now, this isn't my positive spin on it. It's just data, right? We are seeing this play out in real time. And yes, it takes time for it to come to its conclusion. It takes time for us to get back to the time where we're going to see those mid-sized holders come in and help move price to the upside. But it takes place the same way every single time. The greatest thing about the crypto market is the transparency that comes with it. You don't have this type of on-chain data in the stock market, right? You'd have to hack into something to get this type of data. But what it's showing us right now is SHIB is in fact building foundational strength. We talk about fundamentals. This is it. SHIB is gaining strength in fundamentals. And although there may be some articles out there to try to FUD you out of your position, frankly, it's not going to matter at some point because the market's going to take off. Shiba Inu is going to start moving. And guess what? Those holders that come back in that help move the price, the speculators, that is what helps take Shiba Inu to a new all-time high. So I appreciate you guys as always. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully that didn't bore anyone. I find this stuff very interesting. And right now, SHIB is really executing this strength building exercise to perfection. So have a great day. Show your love below. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.